Do you think there should be an emergency session of National Cabinet called?
Absolutely. I mean, this is a terrorist attack that's occurred here in Melbourne. It follows a series of unacceptable and violent incidents of anti-Semitism across the country. The government needs to do more, much more, and do it urgently, because right now the Jewish community feels unsafe and it feels alone and it feels obviously very let down.
So the Prime Minister now labels it a terror attack. That came after your call on the weekend. Are you satisfied that he's done that? Are you satisfied with his response?
Look, I welcome these comments, but I also welcome the increased security funding and the Prime Minister visiting a synagogue in Western Australia. But these are all happening after the fact. And what we have to acknowledge is over the last 14 months, the government's weakness in combating and fighting anti-Semitism has emboldened those who hate and those that harm. And enough is enough, because we cannot have Jewish students feeling unsafe on campus. We need a judicial inquiry into anti-Semitism on campus, which should be houses of learning but have become hotbeds of hate. We need a national police task force, not to deal with other forms of hate, but to deal with anti-Semitism, because that is what predominantly we have seen across our country over the last 14 months. We also need the state premiers to restrict and ban demonstrations of the kind that we've seen outside places of worship, whether they're a church, whether they're a mosque, whether they're a temple, or whether they are a synagogue. These are places that should be safe for the occupants inside, not where they are locked down as they were at the Great Synagogue in Sydney just last week, where people terrified inside. Enough is enough, Prime Minister. No more words. We want to see concrete action.
So he got quite defensive on that point yesterday, Josh, by saying, hey, whenever there's been an act, or words to this effect, whenever there's been an act of anti-Semitism, they've strongly called it out. What do you say to that?
Well, it needs more than calling it out. It needs stamping it out. And that's my point, Pete. It needs strong action. So just yesterday, we have seen demonstrations across Melbourne and Sydney where people are holding a sign saying Zionism is terrorism. As you know from the Sky documentary, Prime Minister John Howard said he was a Zionist. Sir Peter Cosgrove says he's a Zionist. Nova Peris says she's a Zionist. Are these terrorists? Yet we have in Australia people who are hiding their identity, protesting violently and holding up these signs that are inciting hate. We have also seen people over the weekend in Australia calling to globalise the Intifada. The Intifada was a series of bus bombings and suicide bombings that took innocent lives. Yet people in Australia are calling for more of that behaviour. This is not on. And so it's a whole culture of hate that the Prime Minister must take on as a matter of urgency. We don't need words. We don't need apologies after the act. We need concrete and specific action now.
Okay. What about the Victorian Premier? How much of a role has she got to play in this? Because she didn't even turn up to that event yesterday and was heckled on Friday after her press conference.
Well, the Premier of Victoria gets a big fail for her government's response to anti-Semitism. We've seen the majority of incidents actually taking place across Victoria. We've seen the violent riots in Caulfield where Jewish people in their own homes and on their own streets felt unsafe. We've seen campuses at Melbourne University become unsafe for Jewish students. And of course, we don't have the same strong laws here in Melbourne that we have seen even Chris Minns seek to bring in New South Wales. So we need to see a lot more in Victoria. We should have a permit system for the demonstrations, because these demonstrations are occurring in a way that is, leading to more violence, leading to more hate, and that is not what we want in Australia.
Yeah. Just a final one here, Josh, and you have been very strong on calling this a terror incident, which the Prime Minister has come around to. What do you make of those who claim, well, shouldn't it be up to police to call it a terror incident after a proper investigation?
Well, the legislation, the criminal code, is very clear. Something is a terrorist incident. An event or an attack is a terrorist incident where it's racially or religiously or politically motivated and it's designed to cause harm. And we've seen a firebombing in a synagogue just behind us with people inside who could have been killed. And that is coming in this climate of rising anti-Semitism. So, Pete, it's clear for everyone to see. It took only a few hours for Chris Minns in New South Wales, the Premier, to call it a terrorist attack. The Premier in Victoria is using, weasel words. And then, of course, the Prime Minister has had a very delayed response. We need actual, concrete action, because anything other than that course of action from our leaders is a dereliction of their fundamental duty.
Josh Frydenberg, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.